Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Well, my friends, you are in for a treat and a pleasure and a delight. My amazing friend, Gina Trimarco, is here. Gina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. I like to call you my brother of another mother.
Yes, as sister from another mister on my end of the situation here.
Perfect.
So for the few people that might not know, could you give us, just in summary, the Gina Trimarco story and what brought you to the work that you're doing today? And what were some interesting pit stops along the way?
Oh, yeah. So I will try to keep this short because, I'm quite the talker as a former recovering performer. But if we kind of reverse engineer it a little bit, I've been with Sales Gravy for about 3 years now. And prior to that, I was running my own sales training and leadership company and improv theater and school in South Carolina. And I'm from Chicago originally. And you think Chicago, you think improv. So growing up in Chicago, that was something that you just did. You took improv classes, which I did during college because I was an accounting major that a lot of people will be surprised by. And I suck at math. And I have always been creative and in the arts. And so I took improv during college to balance this future accounting future I was going to have, and discovered it's like I can't do this because my dad wants me to do this, being the didn't make it past grade school as a much older Italian father in Chicago and wanted the best for me. And I think he thought accounting would be the way to do it. And so long story short, through improv, I found that my talents were in other places, like in marketing and in sales and in producing. So I was in the entertainment world as a marketing and PR person for a long time. And with that came the role of having to oversee salespeople, even though I was a marketing person. And so I had to learn all that part of it. And I kept avoiding having to sell, but I had to be able to manage salespeople. And then when I started multiple businesses throughout the years, I had to learn how to sell. And throughout the process, people kept trying to recruit me to sell. And I'm like, ew, sales, icky. I can't do that. Until I realized I'm really good at it. And now I understand why I should be selling. But if we really go back to my early sales days, it would be Gina at age 10, if you can imagine, working in a flea market, selling a variety of items from used toasters to stolen members only jackets that fell off the back of a truck, and being able to make keys because my father was also a self-taught locksmith. And so my sales career really started at about age 10. That's it. There's those milestones for you, and as quick as I could give it to you.
Wow. So much to dig into there. So my only flea market experience, and it's really about garage sales. So when people are moving, friends move, hey, can you come? We'll buy pizza, and can you help us work the garage sale? You talk about used toasters, like old calculators that have the roll of tape and everything. My job there was not to make money. My job was to get rid of the crap. So if someone came up with the toaster that was labeled $5, they say, okay, well, that's $5. Oh, hang on. How much for this roll of tape calculator? Free with purchase. That is free with purchase. How much is this ratty old Phillies jacket? Free with purchase. Free with purchase. They're like, really? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Take it out of here. Thanks for buying toaster. Tell your friends. So it was not a high profit yard sale experience to have me come and work your yard sale. Hopefully you had more savvy than I did.
Well, it's so funny because you and I have like these parallel lives. It's so funny you bring up the $5 toaster because I am known for the $5 toaster story.
Ooh.
Okay. This is kind of like a foundational story that people always want to hear about because It was one of the most embarrassing things of my life working in the flea market with my dad. And this is where I learned how to get over the fear of asking for money because someone came to buy the $5 toaster at our table and did the negotiating of like, I'll give you 3, I'll give you 4. And my father stuck to it's 5. And the guy left. And I was like, sort of like, this innocent kid going, why wouldn't you take the $5? And I was sort of embarrassed over the negotiation. Guy leaves, he comes back and he goes, I'll take the toaster for $5. And my dad says, it's 10. I was so embarrassed and didn't understand it. And now I love to tell that story because there's so much behind that story. Like, right? Like the guy left, couldn't find another toaster, came back, and the value of the toaster went up. And my dad knew it. Because my dad was really good at walking the flea market floor every morning. And so he knew who was selling what. So he knew the value of the product and he wasn't about to negotiate down. He negotiated up like this thing just got more valuable. So that's my $5 toaster story.
It's the only toaster in the building, dude. I know it. And now you know it. And now it's $10.
Exactly.
So funny. Well, tell us a little bit about, because there's a huge transition there between Gina today, who loves to sell, sells intuitively, brings joy to it, brings fun to it, brings value to it, and Gina, who was so afraid of the S word. And what was that transition like? Who were some of your mentors? How did you get your arms around this whole what selling is and what selling is all about?
That's a really great question. So there's a couple different angles on this. I'm curious by nature, and I know you're big into curiosity, and I function as a salesperson like the curiosity of a child. Like I'm just genuinely interested in wanting to know things about people, and I'll forget that we're actually in a conversation to solve a problem. I just really am curious. And so throughout my career, especially in marketing and PR, right, you're selling in marketing and PR in a different way. People kept pursuing, like saying, hey, you should sell. And I'm like, why? Why are you saying that? Because I had a different perspective of what selling was. And I just kept asking why. I wanted to understand why people kept pursuing me for this. And so I kind of like, as I gathered that data of people saying, well, you're just so good at talking to people and I feel really comfortable with you. And it's like, I want to buy something from you, even though you're not selling to me. And as I started gathering that data, I'm like, this really is not about selling. This is just about showing up and being, which is very much an improv way of being. So that was part of it. Another part of it, when you own businesses, right? I owned my first business in my 20s because I graduated at a time that was another recessionary time. I was in television production. I was freelancing, could not find a job. And it turned into basically a marketing agency. I was producing commercials. And it just kept growing. So I was producing people's TV commercials. I was doing their PR campaigns. I was doing their media buying. So I had a lot of experience as a media buyer. And in that process, I picked up a lot of data, but also if you're in business, you have to sell the business. Like you have to actually go out and get more business so you could be the artisan, but you're going to be a starving artisan if you don't go get the business. So I think I got more and more comfortable with that because like if you want to survive and eat, you're going to have to be able to sell. So through the years, it just became like a part of my DNA. Like when I think about being on 100% commission sales, people freak out about that. To me, it's just natural. Like you just become a hunter when you're on 100% commission sales and then the sky's the limit. So I think it was just a combination of things throughout the years that sales just became fun to me.
We interrupt this interview with an important announcement. If you're committed to better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees, get over to doitselling.com right now and grab a copy of my new book. That's the deal, kids. Grab a copy of the new book and then get all the bonuses, companion tools, trainings, and downloads at doitselling.com. Buy the book, get the bonuses. Buy the book, get the bonuses. Buy the book, get the bonuses. That's how it works. I'll see you over there.
Tell us a little bit about, so you had your own sales training company, before connecting with Sales Gravy. How did you first learn about Sales Gravy? Did you read one of Jeb's books, or how did he come across your radar? How did you come across his?
Great question. So, of course, Jeb has been a mentor of mine for years from afar, right? I read the books, followed him. And interestingly enough, like when I started the sales training company, it was actually a training company that was an extension of our improv theater because we were using improv as a modality in leadership and in sales. First in leadership, that's where I started because that I felt like was my strongest point in developing really good teams and cultures. I was struggling with selling the concept of leadership because nobody wants to buy that they have a leadership problem. And all of a sudden, my improv classes started filling up with timeshare salespeople. Like the general public can take these classes, right? All these timeshare salespeople are showing up, and I'm like, what is going on? And it was like a Pied Piper effect. One timeshare salesperson had really good experience using improv in their job, and they started following, right? So that's how the sales training aspect took off. And so then I was reading every sales book I could read because I'm like, I want to be as smart at this as possible. You know, my modality was improv. And at the time, I didn't know how to like make improv fit, but I knew there was something there. But I wanted to get all this other thought leadership. So Jeb came into my radar. And through the years, like I started, my first podcast was The Pivotal Leader. My current podcast is Women Your Mother Warned You About. That is skewed for sales. And I got Jeb on the show. And so I kept trying to get Jeb on the show. And I finally got him on the show. And he was kind of very interested. And once we started talking a little bit about improv, I managed to get on his show. I kind of ambushed unintentionally. My producer talked to his producer and I'm like, get me on Jeb's show. And sure enough, they get me on Jeb's show and I show up. So now we already have a relationship and Jeb loves being on a podcast. And so he's in his studio getting ready. I'm in my at the time I was in the middle of a divorce, living in a mobile home. Like to me, it's still funny thinking about that day. And there I am, like all nervous. I'm like getting on his show. And he just goes, I'm ready. And I go, I'm ready. He's like, I'm ready. I'm like, good, I'm ready. And then he finally goes, am I on your show or are you on my show? I'm like, oh, I'm on your show. He's like, what? How'd you get on my show? Nobody gets on my show. And so there it was. There I am on the show. And he was very cordial and professional and ran with it. Was not prepared for it, but did the most amazing job at improv because he just ran with it. And we got into an improv conversation and I put him through the yes and exercise. And he's like, oh my, like he struggled with it. And then at the end of the podcast, he said, I got a proposal for you. What if you did some training for our clients using improv? And so I came on board as an independent contractor because I was already producing some on-demand courses and that's how it started. And that was literally 2 months before COVID hit. And so as I was going through the process, my business started tanking because I didn't have the infrastructure to go virtual fast enough. And so I was already independent contracting for Jeb and I just reached out and said, hey, what if I came on board full time? What do you think? And that was it.
There you go. There you go. And you and I are also the co-founders of a new broadcast network called WKJH, which is Keep Jeb Happy. Keep Jeb Happy. So little inside joke, of course, from me.
Yes.
You're amazing.
Yep, exactly. Everybody's got to check out David on my podcast to hear that.
So you have this amazing background in improv, and we've been mentioning it a couple of times. Let's zoom out 30,000 feet.
Sure.
Like Denzel Washington would say, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. What is improv? What are some of the principles of improv? And how does improv map over to both leadership and sales? I know that's a 3-week long answer, but just start anywhere you like with what is improv and how does it layer onto sales and leadership?
So let's start with what is improv, right? Great question. 5-year-old explanation, right? When we think about improv and improvising, we're making things up in the moment, right? In sales, we have to have scripts and frameworks. And sometimes we have to be able to shift really quickly and get off the framework and the script because we're dealing with the unexpected, right? Life is improv. We have to deal with the unexpected that goes off course. When you think of improv comedy is, right, because it's not just about comedy. Most people, when they hear the word improv, they go straight to the comedy piece of it. It is just one thing that comes out, is one byproduct, is the comedy of like, I'm going to get on stage. I have no script. I'm going to take a suggestion from the audience. I do have a framework in improv, and I'm going to take that audience suggestion and I'm going to create something in the framework box that's not fully scripted. And so I'm going to make it up in the moment. And it's important to understand there's a difference between improv comedy and stand-up comedy, because stand-up comedy is, I am one person on stage. I am writing out my script, my set, and I am going to put it out to the audience. The same thing every single time, no matter what the audience is, which is where stand-up comedians get in trouble because the audience changes and you got to shift. And if you don't, right, you're not going to be as effective. In improv, we shift with the audience. I've been known in the middle of a show during an intermission to say, okay, guys, this audience is sucking. They're not getting us. We need to change the format of the show immediately to get them and pull them in. And so in improv comedy, we're working in an ensemble environment, meaning that we've got all these people on the team there to help us win together and win the audience. So it's important to understand like the improv comedy aspect of it from a performance standpoint, but this is completely parallel to what we should be doing in sales. If you are not still understanding improv comedy, go Google Whose Line Is It Anyway? That TV show will give you an idea of the entertainment aspect of it. So that's what improv is. Now, how do we layer this, whether it's in leadership or sales? The number one rule in improv on stage as a performer or on stage as a sales performer is to make other people look good. When we stay focused on my job is to make David look good, two things happen. I automatically look good because I've spotlighted him, and he not only looks good, but he feels good because I've made it about him. How does that work in sales? That should be pretty obvious for our 5-year-olds out there, right? When you make the client look good, my mindset every time I'm working with a client, not just in closing the deal, when I go out and deliver sales or coaching or consulting, I'm always thinking about how do I make the client win? How do I help the client win in front of their bosses? How do I deliver something that's going to make them stand out, right? That is always the mindset I have. From a leadership perspective, think about building a healthy culture where everybody feels like their opinion matters, right? So it's not just making people look good, but we work off a concept of yes and. I don't own it. It's well known in the improv world. Yes and is a philosophy and mythology of acceptance without judgment. Yes, I hear what you're saying. And we could also do this, right? It's a collaborative approach to what we're doing. Yes, I hear that we're too much money. And let me show you the value of that. Versus the yes, but where we automatically shoot someone down. You talk about this in your book. Let's plug your book, like the collaborative approach. You talk about those phrases that we hear, like circling back, checking in, right? All the phrases that trigger the brain to be like, whoa, I'm about to be hurt by a salesperson. Yes, but has the same effect. And we do it in every conversation without realizing it. Sometimes we're conditioned, but the brain is going, whoa, danger. I just got yes butted. I don't like this person. So there's a 2-part piece of this yes and. It's the acceptance piece without judgment and collaborating with someone and validating. And then there's like the literal wording of it that hurts us. Did I answer that? It was a long answer.
Yes. So an example that is just, it's so common and it's so harmful. You're in a brainstorming meeting, and this could be either leadership or sales leadership. And the sales leader comes in and says, hey, let's have a brainstorming session about growing our sales or penetrating our accounts more thoroughly and whatever. So people are kind of hesitant because, again, there may be this environment of yes, but that is prevalent. Person throws out the first idea. The boss literally says, and if I wasn't in the room, I wouldn't have believed it. The boss literally says, okay, who has a better idea than that one? So it's like, okay, let's get a big sense of everyone wants to participate so they can immediately be shot down by the boss, right? So I think there's a difference. And again, you're the improv expert, not me, but there's a time to be open and for yes, and that is a completely separate time for judgment or criticism or evaluation of those ideas. Talk about what happens when those two get intermixed too early or too often, and how do we put a nice, clean separation line in there so that we can really do some brainstorming, and then after that, really do some good evaluation and filtering and sorting.
There's so many ways to attack this and unpack this. I am a big believer and proponent of the yes and has to constantly permeate. If you are going to say, let's have a brainstorming, let us, the us part of this, if I'm part of a brainstorming, what you're telling me is that I can contribute. If you then show up and say, who's got a better idea? You just told me I can't contribute. And so I think you have to set some expectations too, or some parameters around what is a brainstorming, if we're going to use that as a specific, like, okay, so in this brainstorming, this is how it's going to run. Everybody's going to put their ideas on the table. That's kind of dumbing it down. But in general, from a cultural perspective, why not be always open, just open, like to hearing the idea? And instead of yes, butting it, like let's just say that someone gave an idea, let's hear a better idea. Why not say, you know what, David, that is an awesome idea. And, you know, if we did this and this on top of that, how do you think that would look? Like, how would that work out, right? If this, then what? So I think you have to approach it in this open-minded, without judgment, especially as a leader. You don't want to shoot people down, especially in a group. You don't want to even shoot them down one-on-one. You want to kind of coach back. I get bad ideas tossed to me all the time. But the fastest way for me to shut someone down is to say yes, but. And when I ran my improv theater, our number one core value was yes, and. And so you had to function that way as a team. And anytime, because they could see my face, anytime I was like, you could see, I was like, my team would spit back to me, yes, and Gina. And they would call me to the table. I'm like, you're right, because we just naturally go to the negativity. So even the guy who's like, let's get a better idea, he or she is having a knee-jerk reaction versus taking time to process it. Every time I've taken time to process it, I'm like, okay, let me just ruminate on that, right? Again, we don't have to be always talking and reacting. Like, let me just sit on this for a second. Okay. Tell me a little bit more. Let's dig a little bit deeper into your idea so I can see how this would work, right? That's the and part of it. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question.
Yeah.
But it's trying to rewire your brain as a human. This is about emotional intelligence. So I coined the phrase improvised intelligence many years ago because we hear about emotional intelligence. And the higher up you are, we know as a leader, the more you lose it. We know we can improve it, but no one ever talks about how we can improve it. So how to improve it, like emotional intelligence, about that self-awareness and social awareness. Number one, shut up and start listening to people. Lean into what people have to say. And then take time to process and think about it before you open your mouth, and kind of put yourself in their shoes. So that to me is a big aspect of this, is the emotional intelligence aspect, that actually improv skills and exercises and techniques, like listening skills, observation skills, all of that plays into being a better leader.
Yes. So all of these things, I love that list. So emotional intelligence skills, deep listening skills, genuine curiosity, figuring out what people are about, how you can help them on a foundational level. Sometimes when we feel a sales conversation going a little bit off the track, or we notice, like what you said about the face, right? We notice a prospect's body language or facial expression on Zoom. I call this the conversation about the conversation, but it's about going meta. And I don't think a lot of salespeople are brave enough to do this. And I'd love your advice on this. So let's say you and I are having a sales conversation. I say something or ask something. Your face, because you and I both have like zero poker face at all, your face just went like, oh, well, that's weird, or I'm not comfortable with that. At what point do I, as the salesperson, notice that, observe that, and from a place of empathy or curiosity, say, Gina, I'm sorry, let me stop right here. It looks like my last question made you somewhat uncomfortable. Can we talk about that for a minute? So that you're being a human, you're not being a sales scripting robot. Talk to us about when and how should we have that conversation about the conversation if we feel things going off track?
One word answer: immediately. It's immediately, in my opinion. I am a really good read of faces and body language because of my training on stage. I have to be able to read an audience to be able to shift really quickly with them without making too many assumptions, because we can sometimes profile an audience. But I personally, when I see a facial change on Zoom, I do go, hey, David, I'm going to stop right here for a second. I could be wrong, but there's something in your facial reaction that is telling me you have a question or that you disagree, or like, let's talk about that for a second before I go any further. And the second I do that, I win them over, because it's kind of like we like to be heard. Well, we also like our body to be heard. So when you can actually catch that nuance as a human, I think that's even more powerful than actually being able to repeat back something you heard someone say. I literally just read your face. Even when I do this in training virtually, like my students are always like, is it that obvious? I'm like, I'm just trained to look for it. So it's got to be immediate.
Yeah. And I think that shows that we're, especially on Zoom, it shows that we're not watching TV, right?
Exactly.
We're really in a relationship here, and my responses and reactions are registering with you, and that you have the emotional intelligence to pick up on, I just frowned, I just gave a slight nod, I'm not happy about something, and then we can keep the conversation very real.
Yeah, well, imagine it's part of the disruption, right? Again, when we're a buyer, we have a certain expectation of how the seller is going to behave. And most sellers do not call that out and go, hey, let's stop the conversation right here, because I feel like something's awry, right? A buyer is not used to that. And so you disrupt when you actually call that out. And I think psychologically for the buyer, it becomes impressive in some way of like, they just literally went off the script to stop what they're doing to have a real conversation with me.
Yes. Well, let's talk about your podcast, Women Your Mother Warned You About. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to hear about the genesis of that idea and that theme, and what some of the inspiration was to kind of angle the podcast in that direction.
Sure. So Women Your Mother Warned You About, we launched it in January 2019. So this is the 5th season. I launched it with my very good friend, Rachel Pitts, who is now a occasional co-host. She left the show at the end of the 3rd year, because she just took another direction of where she was going with life. And when she and I came up with it, she was a salesperson, I was a salesperson. And we're also what we think of as different women, meaning renegade-ish, rebellish. We felt we were in this box of like how everybody wanted us to be, how everybody expected us to be, the type of woman. And I'm not going off on this whole Barbie tangent with it, but like, this is how you're supposed to be, especially around other women, right? Some of this was coming from the lashback we felt from other women on how they looked at, like, we're out there, we say what we think, we do things that people are thinking about doing but won't do. we're a little more bold, we're a little more brash about it. And we finally said, you know what? I'm so tired of people putting a label on me. I'm just going to actually stand. You get to a point after 40 where you're like, I'm just going to stand in my shoes. If you don't like me, it's okay. And let's just have this show and talk about sales and women and juggling it all. And we couldn't come up with a great name in our opinion. We're just like, oh, we're like those women your mother warned you about. And so we're like, well, let's just have that as a holding place right now for a name until we can come up with a better name for the show. We could never come up with a better name. And the more we talked about it, people were like, that's an amazing show. Now, in this process, I meet Jeffrey Gitomer and I get Gitomer on my show. And Gitomer came on my show because he was a little ruffled because there was somebody on my show that he didn't agree with. And he literally reached out to me and said, I should be on your show, Gitomer, how he is. Yeah. And I'd been wanting to get him on the show. So I got him on the show and we started talking about, I said, oh, I'm starting a podcast, The Women Your Mother Warned You About. And he's like, wow, that's amazing. Like there should be more women doing this and you should be part of my network. And so the show launched on the Sell or Die network with Gitomer. That's how it was born. And we kept that name sort of generic so that if we wanted to shift it, we could into something else. Our vision was to do these things that could help empower women. And as the show has shifted through the years, it's not just a show for women because we have a lot of male followers, a lot. We've got the occasional man on the show. We have a lot of men on the show. You've been on the show. Jeff Bajorek is an occasional co-host on the show. He's actually the fractional male co-host. And it happens to be hosted by a woman your mother warned you about with an angle on sales and life. And sometimes it's more of a life podcast and sometimes it's more of a sales podcast. And I shoot for a blend. That's my goal.
Nice. I've always had this fantasy because, again, break the mold. You're not polite. You're not nice. You're somewhat politically incorrect. This is me I'm talking about. Hosting a show called Two Rude Dudes. And two is TOO. Rude is ROOD. And dudes is DOODS. So two rude dudes.
I love it.
It's like, oh, they're rude. They're not politically correct. They say what's on their mind. They call it like it what it is.
Yes.
This person's an idiot, and not by name, of course. But don't you hate when this happens or this kind of behavior is totally unacceptable? What was that person thinking? And for God's sakes, don't hold the ice cream cone this way. Hold the ice cream cone that way. I'm not sure why that's rude, but anyway. So two rude dudes. And so I think your show is my spirit animal.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's about being unapologetically raw and relevant and real, being exactly who you are and saying things that people are thinking and they just wish somebody would say it. And I found this through my whole career of being that person that behind the scenes, like on a conference call, in a team meeting, someone would ping me and be like, thank you for saying that because I really wanted to say it, but I wouldn't say it. Right. So I'm that person. I'm the renegade. I mean, well, I'm a rainmaker, but not always politically correct. And
a little bit of a bull in a china shop.
A little bit of a bull in a china shop.
Me too.
But always with good intention, always really a softie at the end of the day, always looking out for the best of people or for people to help people. And early on, people said, in the beginning, like we would drop the F-bomb a lot. We've gotten away from that. It comes out because, again, it's like when it shows up because it's real, right? And people are attracted to real people. And so there was definitely an intentionality with it because I wanted to attract the audience I wanted to work with. And you understand this, like when you're trying to pre-qualify that audience, because I got people questioning me going, aren't you afraid you're going to scare off customers? And I said, I hope so. Yeah. Right. Because there are customers I don't want to work with.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. Like if we're not aligned, then it's not going to work. And so this is really the important piece. I know that you had a guest on your show talking about niching. Like you got to niche and be okay with it and not be afraid that you're going to lose business and instead change your mindset of like, what business am I going to actually get because I chose this path?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So true. My friend Mark Levy talks about this in terms of licorice. He says, I want you to be like licorice. Most people, if you ask most people in a survey, they actually don't like licorice. Like I take the black jelly beans out. I don't like licorice. But there's a subset of people who not only like licorice, they love licorice. They collect licorice. They go to Finland and Sweden and Germany and they get the imported licorice. They get licorice that comes in all kinds of crazy ass flavors like lingonberry and blackberry and elderberry and ginger. And they have all kinds of different. So it's okay if you repel the people that don't like licorice, because what you're doing is you're attracting the people who love licorice and they love it a lot and they buy a lot of it.
Exactly.
So be like licorice.
Be like licorice. I love licorice, so I will.
Exactly.
Wait. We're not just going to listen to this episode. There are downloads, there are resources, there are links, there are bonuses waiting for you on this episode's page when you go over to doitmarketing.com/podcast. That's right, doitmarketing.com/podcast. Grab the notes right under this episode. See you over there.
Let's talk about this authenticity thing, because you've got a couple of blogs about this. I know you have many podcast episodes that talk about this. Sometimes not only business gets hard, but life gets hard.
Yeah.
So you're in a personal slump. You told the story of, the interview with Jeb and you're sitting there in the mobile home in the RV going, hey, hello. When there's a lot of motivational crap out there. Oh, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get back on the horse and all this kind of stuff. And I think your philosophy is you got to embrace the suck. You got to live that moment and not be in denial and not sugarcoat it and not pretend it's not there. Talk a little bit about kind of getting real with the low times.
Yeah, God, I love this topic because, again, a little bit taboo in some people's minds. I mean, there's a balance to it. I'm a really optimistic, positive person. I love life. I love what I do. You can feel the excitement and, come out of me. But life is life and things happen and things go wrong and you still got to push through it. And I think the improv part of my life has actually set the tone for me for decades of how I get through life. And that was probably the biggest thing that I found through improv of this yes and. Okay, so this just happened to me. If this, then what? Right? It's always that phrase, if this, then what? Okay, if this is happening, what good can come from it? And so that is always my mindset of what good can come from it. I don't find myself special compared to anybody else, but I've definitely had this roller coaster of things throughout my life, as many people do. And if you haven't had that, then you probably won't understand me as well. So if I think like my first marriage, he didn't have a lot of hard things in his life. And so there was always a disconnect that we couldn't have empathy for each other. So that's always been my approach of, okay, you can't sit down in the dumps forever. You have to pull yourself up and keep going. And you need to see the beauty in what just went wrong. So every time something would go wrong, my frame of mind would be like, ooh, something good's going to happen. And I just lived by that my entire, for the last, I don't know, a long time. I just always look at what could possibly be good that's going to come out of this. 2020 is a great example of everything that could derail for me did, between my marriage, my dog dying, my mother dying, losing my business, getting COVID, my best friend trying to kill himself, like you name it. It was one thing after another. Now I am a spiritual person, and I always am in a mindset of like, all right, God, you got a plan. I don't know what it is. You're going to let me know. And I stayed in that. But there was a point in 2020 near the end, I was like, I'm done. I don't know what you're talking. I'm done. And that was one of the very few times where I struggled to pull myself up, but it took me 48 hours. So my pity party usually lasts a day at the most if I have one. And then I just live in this mindset of I'm excited. And part of this goes to how improv has rewired my brain too, because we fail on stage all the time and we are rewarded for it. we're rewarded every time we fail because the audience laughs. So fall down, get laugh, you win. Now you're actually looking to fail because failing is actually easier than succeeding. So the audience laughs at us if we succeed on stage, and the audience laughs at us if we fail, but the failure's easier. This is an epiphany I had earlier this year, that you can be rewarded by failure. And when you have that, then you seek failure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and then also knowing that, I think this is one of those internet memes, but there's a reason it's an internet meme. Failure is temporary, right?
Yeah.
Failure is temporary. And I love that question. You didn't say it this way, but it's the equivalent of like, what's life teaching me?
Yeah.
Right now,
Exactly.
Because of this situation, because of this failure, because of this dead end that I just hit.
Yeah. And that's also that's where curiosity kicks in again. Being curious about why something wrong happened. Like, okay,
Yeah.
why did this happen? The curiosity can drive you.
Yes. What are the different ways that people can buy Gina Trimarco? You've got courses, coaching, consulting, training. I know you're a fantastic speaker. You do sales meetings, etc. But give us kind of what are the investable opportunities? What's on the Gina menu?
Oh gosh, what's not on the Gina menu? And I say that jokingly, but again, coming from an improv perspective, there's certain things on the menu. And then it's like, how can I help you create what you want? Right? That's part of it too. So at Sales Gravy, there's a lot of opportunities to work with me specifically. Sales training, for one. So we've got virtual training. We have on-site training. We've got all of the amazing books that Jeb has written and curriculum that goes with that. Of course, I've got curriculum too that's improv-based curriculum, like selling with stories and creative selling and what to say when you don't know what to say. I'm recording a class next week called Selling with Confidence. So I'm super excited about that because I'm very big into confidence and imposter syndrome because this comes up so much with customers that now I've created that course, and you can have those all either on demand or live at Sales Gravy. I do keynote speak at Sales Gravy, so you can have me virtually for that. Do a lot of sales kickoffs, so I can come on site and do that. I oversee our coaching division, so I actually help assign clients to coaches, or I am coaching. I love coaching. I probably love it the most of everybody on the team. I just love working one-on-one with people, so that's an option. And if you live in Myrtle Beach, you can take improv classes live with me, because our theater shut down for 3 years, and I had a team of my own trainers and improv instructors and performers, and they've been on me for like 2.5 years of when are you bringing it back? When are you bringing it back? And an opportunity showed up. I partnered with an artistic director of another theater because I started performing for another theater once a year, just to get my stage presence. And he got a space and he said, do you want to come do classes here? So I literally dusted off the old signage that I pulled down and put in the garage. And we started doing that just a month ago. So if you're local to Myrtle Beach, you can come take a class in person. And you can find me at salesgravy.com or ginatrimarco.com.
How cool is that? How cool is that right there? So I've got
cool.
2 final questions here as we're landing the plane. The final question is what resources, links, how can people get in touch, all of that good stuff. The second to last question, if folks were to take one overarching concept from our entire conversation today, what would you want that one key takeaway to be?
My key takeaway would be the emotional intelligence piece of this, and improving your emotional intelligence, whether you're a leader or you're a salesperson or you're a sales leader. That is key to success, that improvised intelligence piece of it. And it's really easy to get better at it. There's classes that you can take to do that. I often will help people find an improv class in their local town where they can go in person and do that. That's an opportunity. Or again, go to salesgravy.com or salesgravy.university. If you go to salesgravy.university, you can actually type in my name and all my classes will pop up. If you follow me on Instagram, and my Instagram is Gina Trimarco, I've got a Linktree link that will give you, it's up to my social media person keeps it up to date. of like, here are all the courses I'm teaching. Here are my on-demand courses. So I've got live and on-demand. So you can find all of those there. So that would be the best way, is probably Instagram or LinkedIn, to find all the things I'm doing. And yes and is the takeaway.
Yes, and then of course the podcast, Women Your Mother
Warned You
About .com. So anything else that you want to leave people with as far as links, we'll put these in the show notes. They'll be one click away. You've given us a number of things. Is there anything else that people should know about the Gina Empire?
I think that's it for now. Otherwise, spoiler alert. I mean, I haven't talked about it too much, but I am in the process of writing a book that comes out next year. So I just leave that as a teaser.
And the theme song with that is dun dun dun. Gina's book coming soon for global domination.
There you go.
I love it. Can you give us the theme, the title, a little bit of a prequel? What's in the book?
Improvised Intelligence.
There it is, my friends.
There it is.
Improvised Intelligence.
Yeah.
Coming to a bookstore or virtual bookstore near you. So when this book comes out, can we have you back and talk about the book, promote the book, give away something or other, have some crazy fun with Improvised Intelligence?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to hold you to it. Perfect. Awesome. Well, Gina Trimarco, it's been a delight and a pleasure as always. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you, David.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.